that's enough of that, right? We're going to do one final scene with Kyle here, and then I'm going to take some of your Super Chat questions. This scene is kind of long. It's about Ayn Rand. We're going to let Ayn Rand talk, and then we're going to hear the brilliant Kyle discuss Ayn Rand.
Hear of Ayn Rand, the libertarian hero.
So first, she's not a libertarian. And you'll see why this is so important as he goes on. Ayn Rand is not a libertarian. Because once you call her a libertarian, she is then associated with the anarchists. She is then somehow affiliated in people's mind with the anarchists, and we'll see that in a minute. We'll see it, how his mind
This is her summing up her philosophy on economics and government.
We would not give the government or the majority or any minority the right to take the life or the property of others. That was the original American system.
When you say take the property of others, I imagine that you're talking now about taxes.
Yes, I am.
And you believe that there should be no right by the government to tax. You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation, regulation during times of stress, certain kinds of rent controls and things like that.
That's right. I'm opposed to all forms of control. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy. Let me put it briefly. I'm for the separation of state and economics, just as we had separation of state and church, which led to peaceful coexistence among different religions after a period of religious wars. So the same applies to economics. If you separate the government from economics, if you do not regulate production and trade, you will have peaceful cooperation and harmony and justice among men.
Agree to disagree? No, to me, that's an idea that is solely based in theory.
Now, what's interesting is he talks about this, but he never challenges that theory. He challenges supposedly the practical application of it. But note, again, he's going to connect it to libertarians.
Okay, see, that's the thing about libertarians. I agree with them on many things.
No, she's not a libertarian.
40% of things.
Not a libertarian.
We're on board with the NSA spying. I think that's ridiculous. We're on board with foreign policy. Most of them are non-interventionists.
Here's an example, right? He immediately associates the libertarians with Ron Paul, non-interventionist. 9/11 was our fault. We shouldn't do anything. We should apologize to the Muslim world. That's what he associates with libertarians, and therefore he thinks that's Ayn Rand. Now, that's why I don't want anybody to call her a libertarian, because once you affiliate that kind of thinking about foreign policy with libertarians, and then libertarians, Ayn Rand is a libertarian. No, we're not non-interventionists in that sense when it's an issue of self-defense.
I'm a committed non-interventionist. Most of them are against the drug war, and not only for the decriminalization of drugs, for the legalization of drugs. I'm on board with them on that. So there are many areas where we totally agree, but then there are areas like this, where it's purely based on something that they thought out and argued in their head, but empirically, when you apply their ideas, it goes to shit. Okay, and they hate it when you bring this up, but it's the truth. You want to know what a libertarian system looks like? Look at Somalia.
Okay, here it is, right? So, yeah, if you think libertarianism, you think Ayn Rand is anarchy. If you think Ayn Rand is no rule of law, if you think Ayn Rand is no government, then yes, Somalia is the model. And in criticizing anarcho so-called capitalists, yeah, using Somalia is not a bad idea. But don't do that to Ayn Rand. She didn't believe in such a system. She rejects the idea that Somalia is a model for anything but barbarism. Actually, she accepts the idea that Somalia is a model of anarchy. So, objectivists are not libertarians. Not libertarians. We do not share a tent, a platform, an agenda with people who do not believe that there should be any government.
Somalia has no centralized government.
True.
And everybody has weapons too.
True.
And you have just warlord factions.
True.
It's pure private property system. Okay.
No!
Warlord faction.
How can you have private property when you have no recognition of property? There's no private property. All property is owned by the warlords. All property is accessible through violence. There's no recognition of rights. You can only have the recognition of rights if you have a monopoly over the use of retaliatory force. You cannot have rights. I mean, you all have rights, but those rights cannot be recognized if you have a situation of warlords. So warlords and property rights do not go together. Again, if you get these concepts in your head, then yeah, capitalism and Ayn Rand and objectivism don't make any sense, because with no government, everybody's shooting and killing each other. And it's anarchy, yes, but that's not objectivism. That's not Rand. She believed in limited government. She didn't say a separation of all human activity. Well, she didn't say there should be no government. She talked about a separation of government from economics, thereby recognizing that government is needed indeed. To have good economics, to have markets, one needs a government that protects property rights primarily, but generally individual rights, and that prohibits the use of force within those markets. It's only when you extract force can markets exist. In a market like Somalia, in a place like Somalia, there are no markets. Certainly no markets based on property rights.
Fighting each other. When there's no centralized government, you do lose organization and structure. That doesn't mean the government can't get too big. Of course it could get too big. But the answer is no government? I mean,
So that's what you need government for? Organization and structure? And maybe he's gonna say central planning too.
The problem is the absolutism. I mean...
Yeah, as if he's not absolutist in almost everything that he argues. If, for example, he was an absolutist earlier about just the wonderful benefits of capping interest rates below 15%. He was absolutely, he said almost everybody agrees with this. But he's suddenly against absolutism when it doesn't appeal to him, when it's on a more abstract level, when it applies to actual political theory, because he can't think in terms of abstractions and he can't deal with philosophical abstractions. He's all concrete bound.
Therein lies the religious absolutism of libertarianism, that the government never, ever, ever has the answer, and you need to totally separate state from economics. I mean, think about that. She says no taxes. That's what I want, no taxes whatsoever. Okay, so then say bye-bye to bridges, roads.
Really, you can't imagine a way in which bridges and roads are built, particularly in a modern day with GPS, without taxes? And imagine the wealth that would exist in people's pockets if they actually didn't pay taxes and they could continuously reinvest that money. Imagine that wealth in comparison to the amount they would have to pay on the toll roads.
The army, cops, courts, the FDA to make sure that your
No, there wouldn't be an FDA. Don't need an
FDA. Or some sort of toxic poisoning. Now, of course, they would respond to each and every one of these things. They say, well, roads, we'd have private roads. Yeah, we would, and they probably suck. And not only that, when you turn on to all different ones, you'd have to pay a toll every time you make a turn.
Notice that, again, he says they suck. Why? Why would they suck? I mean, government services typically suck. Why would private roads suck? Where's the private incentive, the profit motive, or just the motive to make the world around you a better place? Why is that somehow inferior to the motive of politicians, of bureaucrats? I tell you why. Because they're motivated by the public interest, and those greedy businessmen are motivated by self-interest. And we know, Republicans and Democrats, left and right, all recognize that self-interest is bad and the public interest is good. Kyle is just channeling that feeling.
That You want it to cost $17 for you to take a 10-minute ride because every street you turn on.
If you save $100 on taxes, $17 is a
deal. And also what happens when it snows, for example. Half the roads might not even plow them on.
Why would they not plow them on time when they're making a profit by plowing them? Today, you've got problems with plowing because what's the incentive to plow them? But if you're actually plowing them so the cars can start moving on them, so you can start collecting those tolls, don't you think they plow them more frequently, faster, more efficiently? Really?
They're privately owned, and then half the ways to get to work.
But notice, this is a critique of Ayn Rand.
I mean, there are so many practical problems when you apply stuff like this.
Like what?
Private bridges. People just wouldn't. I mean, look, they would find ways to get across.
Yeah, they would.
They wouldn't build good bridges that last a long time.
Why? Why wouldn't they build good bridges that last a long time? We build good cars. We build buildings, skyscrapers, buildings, homes that are built by private individuals, private businesses for the profit motive in order to make money. And they last a long time. Those buildings don't seem to crumble after 3 years, in spite of the fact that they're built for profit.
There's no profit in making the bridges, and it wouldn't just be helping you, it would be helping everybody else.
Really?
There are fundamental problems with this, and she would say privately fund the cops and the army and the FDA and stuff like that, or the courts.
Well,
and
again, she believes in government. Don't say she would say that, right? She would say fund it through
that is
other means, but coercive taxation.
Who is the army going to represent if it's only rich donors giving money to the army? They're only going to represent the rich.
Why? Particularly if they're constitutionally bound to represent all of us. Particularly if, everybody is paying in taxes. Particularly if people still can vote out the bastards in charge and the vote is not based on how much money you have. Give me a break. I mean, really, if you think about these things, they're not that hard.
Same thing with cops and
it's the underlying moral premise that's hard. The actual concretes are fairly easy. This is all nonsense.
If it's only the rich funding it via voluntary donations, whenever there's a problem and the rich have some sort of dispute with the poor, they're always going to side with the rich because they fucking paid them. So many problems with this. Or how about, look, let's get into some other stuff here about regulation, because she said separation of economy and state.
She did.
Well, so that means there's no child labor laws.
Yes, no child labor laws. Imagine what would happen in the world today if there were no child labor laws. I mean, I would immediately hire a bunch of 12-year-olds to trade for my hedge fund, right? Who is going to hire 12-year-olds exactly? Maybe to deliver newspapers, maybe to take out the trash, maybe to clean the stairs. I cleaned stairs when I used to mop stairs and take out garbage when I was 12 years old. That's what I got paid for.
Because that's the government infringing upon the liberty of a business owner to freely talk to other people and make contracts.
Contract with children is not something that anybody, certainly not Ayn Rand, would advocate for. Children cannot sign contracts. You don't need anything. You don't need to be brilliant to understand that. And clearly Ayn Rand, I mean, if you're going to critique Ayn Rand, read her stuff. Don't listen to a 3-minute clip and think you understand what separation of state from economics is. And you understand what economics is. We're talking about contracts, which is law. She's not advocating the separation of the law from the state. Law is the state.
If it happens to be a child, well, none of the government's business. They don't have the authority to step in and say no. No child labor laws, no minimum wage. That's long gone.
Well, I'm not even going to get into that, but yes, no minimum wage. Rejoice, the poorest of the poor, because finally you will be able to climb that ladder out of poverty if you have a little ambition. Minimum wages are the stupidest economic policy ever invented.
No safety regulations. So let me give you a few real-world examples here where their ideology fails. How about when GE notoriously and infamously dumped toxic waste into the Hudson River because it was cheaper to dispose of it in
Again, lack of imagination. If the Hudson River was private, would they dump all the toxic waste in it? And look, this goes on and on and on with bogus claims about capitalism that just a little bit of research. Ayn Rand wrote about all these things. She answered every one of these objections. So, a few things here to sum up, because I'm not going to do the whole Kyle video because we're running out of time. And it turns out I have many more comments than I expect on each one of these things. It's so important that Ayn Rand not be associated with libertarians for the reasons you just saw. It's so important that Ayn Rand not be associated with conservatives. And what's common to everybody out there who criticizes Ayn Rand is they don't read her stuff. And particularly in today's day of YouTube, where people, can just listen to a 3-minute video clip and they think they know something about something. I mean, this is why my videos are always long. You can't do anything in a 3-minute clip. I'm sorry, you can't learn anything. You can't communicate ideas in 3-minute clip. You can hint, you can stimulate, you can point. So I encourage everybody to make clear that Ayn Rand stands alone, unfortunately. And that if people are going to criticize her, let her read her. Because, again, every one of Carl's objections is basically answered by Ayn Rand in Capitalism Not an Ideal. Or